Tonight on Bold Leaders with Big Hearts.
If you're hitting obstacles, many times God's giving you the opportunity to build the muscle to this at that next level. Like, that's the whole point of why I think God hides that full picture, because if you saw it, you wouldn't have the guts to go for it, because again, it's so much bigger than you.
Welcome to another episode of Bold Leaders with Big Hearts, and this podcast is for you if you want to learn more about how to find and live your true purpose in life, find your tribe, and succeed for the greatest good of all. And my name is Julian Hepp. I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm a business and spiritual mentor and author, originally from Lake Constance, Germany. And I'm really excited for today's episode because we have a very special guest. And in general, we invite leaders, entrepreneurs that live their purpose in order to inspire. Because in general, our world seems to be in a crossroads, not easy times. Maybe you feel it as well. And I see it as an invitation to rise, to grow. And when us human beings take on the journey of business, the journey of purpose, we automatically take on a hero's journey of the soul that wants to grow and evolve. And together with our guests, we go into detail and uncover those typical steps on their hero's journey, which ultimately led them to success. Those typical steps, such as, sometimes on your journey you get tested, you hit a wall. And this is important in order to grow, build that strength, and get rid of negative beliefs. Or sometimes it's a stage that you get supernatural help when you are open to miracles. And we do that to serve you basically as a source of strength, belief, and inspiration, because the thing with the hero's journey is it's a concept that's basically already implemented in your soul. And sometimes you hear a story and something inside of you is activated that basically can change your life. Today you will see the conversation I had with Britnie Turner, and she shared her quite amazing story with me. And Britnie is a well-known award-winning entrepreneur and leader, and one of her main projects is called Heal the Heroes, in which she and her team helps veterans to heal from trauma and then reposition them towards missions that are good for humanity. For example, missions against human trafficking. And she shared her story of how she went from living in her car to owning a private island. So yeah, I'm really excited, and let's go. This show is dedicated to bold leaders with big hearts, because I believe that those who never seem to fit into this world are now, with the help of God, those who are changing it for the better. So hello and welcome, Britnie. First of all, thanks for taking the time for this interview today. And I'm really excited to hear about your story. And the background story of this interview today is that a good friend of mine, Caroline, told me about you and your project, and it really touched my heart. And I think you definitely are the perfect fit for our show. And it would be a great thing, I think, to start with your story of how you started your journey, the obstacles you had to overcome, which led you to where you are today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate what you're doing, Julian. I love this podcast. I love what you're doing for the world through this podcast. And Caroline has just been such a blessing in our life. She's such a shining light of a person. What a wonderful human being. I'm so grateful you guys are friends. But there's a lot of bad news going on in the world. And bad news sells. It really hits on people's fear in their subconscious and makes them want to do it. And they get a lot of views, a lot of listens. And so when I meet people like you who are just dedicated to being a light in the world and spreading good news and solutions on what is working to fight some of the darkest evils and some of the suffering that's happening around the world, that is really important to share those solutions, because we have found breakthroughs in my nonprofit and in my for-profits that can work a lot more places than the, few out of billions of people that are suffering from some of these problems. And so I just want to start by saying thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your dedication to being a light. And I am honored to be on this podcast. My story starts with being 12 years old and watching a documentary that I say really woke me up. I had never heard of human trafficking before, and when I was made aware of it through this film, I realized that that could have been me. Like, the little girl in the movie looked like me. And it was one of these things where, we grew up America poor and you didn't have a perfect life, but if I was in her position, I would pray every single day that someone was willing to do something about my situation. And in so many of these cases, these kids are, brought over borders, nameless, faceless, not understood, like traded, sold, all these things, and nobody's even looking for them. And I remember thinking, like, if that was my life, I would pray every day that someone would care enough to try to help find me. And I dedicated my life to that at 12. And the best I knew how to try to get involved was to become a missionary, like go overseas and serve in these impoverished areas and find where this stuff is happening and put an end to it. And I want to encourage your listeners that many times you're going to have something strike your heart on the journey to finding your purpose. And that's really what it is. It's not that there's this one thing that you're supposed to do, but you will be moved by things that are tied to the thing you're supposed to make a difference in your lifetime. And you're not going to have the perfect picture. And that's really that walking by faith element of just starting to go towards it as best you can. And it's going to not be perfect, but you have to be willing to put up with the humans questioning you on whether or not you've got it right or you've got it perfect. Like, that's not the point. The point is to just be going in that general direction. And so as you start to see or feel things in your life that take you to heightened levels of anger or sadness, then know that you're probably passionate enough to do something about it. And so that was what I felt. And my best guess at the next step was to do mission work. And so I started working different jobs to save up enough money to go on these mission trips to different countries. And there's, at different ages, they'll let you go to different ones. And I couldn't get to Africa until I was 18. But it was so important to me to be out there and try to start finding my way to serving. So I'd go on these different trips, and I imagined it to be this like amazing, holy, happy experience with the kid and like all the stuff. But I got out there and I was so mad, like enraged at the stuff that I saw. And I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm the worst missionary because I'm just angry. But I look at it now and I realize I was super angry because we weren't actually putting an end to the problems. And I was finding a lot more issues than just trafficking. I was finding kids that were thrown in fires because they were born with special needs. I was finding kids that had been, just starved their whole life and didn't even have any clothes and just living in garbage heaps. And then I'd come back from these mission trips to America and I would meet people just so depressed and so drifting and wasting their whole life away or drinking it away or TikToking it away and just doing dumb stuff for entertainment because they had nothing else that was driving them. And it's just like this meaningless life. And I knew that they were hungry for more. They were hungry for purpose. And so that really drove me to start asking better questions. And if I could give you any advice, listeners, it's that all these things that are they're pieces of the puzzle. It all matters. Just keep taking notes and know you're never going to have that full picture. Because if you did have the full picture, you would never feel like that's actually possible for you. Like, that's the whole point of why I think God hides that full picture, because if you saw it, you wouldn't have the guts to go for it, because again, it's so much bigger than you, which is why we're part of this big divine plan. It's my guess, at least. So I'm starting to get these seeds. I'm starting to take these lessons. I'm like this angry missionary person. And I decided to go to a school that trains you how to be an elite missionary, like a really hardcore person. We're trained by special forces. And there was a guy that was our main leader. He was a Green Beret, and I immediately fell in love with him because he was just so attractive to me. He had all these skills, had all this talent, and he didn't look at me. He whatever, was in a different relationship, but I just admired him. I was like, wow, Gavin is so amazing. And so he trained us how to survive about anything, live in the woods and like stay on point with the mission, no matter what else was going on in our life, and to be able to accomplish this really, really hardcore training for a year. And our culmination exercise was a trip to Costa Rica, where they basically just left us in the mountains and we had to find a way to create value for this village. And there was a little girl that I met at the very end of the event that we put on, and I asked her name, and she couldn't answer me. So I asked the translator, hey, what's this girl's name? What's going on? And I found out that she was so horrifically sexually abused as an infant that her vocal cords were destroyed. And I remember being just so enraged. And I guess rage is just my thing. And I was so enraged that the person who was supposed to protect her, her daddy, was the one that did this to her. And that in this community, 1 out of every 4 kids actually died before they turned 1 from sexual abuse. And it was socially accepted that that's just what happens. And I'm like, no. So I went back to my tent and I got on my knees and I said, God, whatever it looks like. And I remember thinking about all the things that I had already set out to do in life, and like a little house and a little picket fence and go boating and just all the things that like middle-class Americans cared about. And I remember I didn't give a crap about anything but being able to help this little girl. And I heard loud and clear, I'm going to take you out of the mission field and I'm going to put you in business. And I was like, what? And that's really hard to hear when you've created a whole identity around doing mission work. And so I immediately questioned if that was real. And I think that's just one of those things. You don't really know it's God talking to you till later, but I did hear that one really loud and clear. And so we left Costa Rica and we're on a bus ride back. And I remember getting told, do you know what happened to Gavin? And I was like, what are you talking about? The guy who just trained us to be incredible and like these amazing leaders and raised up all these teenagers to be this incredible force for good. And they said, yeah, he just killed himself. And that really shocked me. That was my first experience with anybody in the military. That was my first experience with a special forces guy. And I remember thinking, like, this does not compute. Like, this doesn't make any sense. How could somebody with such a beautiful heart, with so many skills, he had it all, took his own life? I'm like, weren't you guys just fighting bad guys where you were trying to live? and then you take your own life? That doesn't make any sense. But again, I had no experience with it. And so it was one of those other things that just was seed planted in my heart as part of this journey.
So I have to pause this interview for a second because I really want to highlight 1 or 2 things Britnie said, because this far from what she said about her journey, it just became so clear, those typical stages of the hero's journey. And I think it's so beautiful of what she's telling us. Like, often when we start our hero's journey, we have such a feeling in our heart that we have a purpose and something that starts to drive us, that we are able to leave our comfort zone. And that's the biggest step of all. And not many people on this earth have the guts to step out of that comfort zone and go on this hero's journey. It's an adventure, and it's a path into the unknown. And like she also said, most of the people, friends, family, they won't like the ideas necessarily. Maybe they talk down on you and they want to tell you, no, it's not good what you're trying to do. And like strong people with a strong feeling of purpose, they are able to push through this first important like barrier.
And so I went back to class the next year, and there was a guy teaching he was some multimillionaire. And at the time, I really hated rich people. And I don't know if that's something you've ever dealt with, but in where I grew up, I was told rich people were all bad guys. And, thanks Disney, or in all the movies, they're the bad guys. But also, like, the church I went to talked about rich people were greedy and evil. And it doesn't really make sense to me now that it was such a hardcore belief in my life, but those beliefs matter. If you are fundamentally a good person and you believe something's going to make you a bad person, you're going to avoid it at all costs, right? And so this guy was teaching in my class, and I skipped class like a really good student. And like a really good student, I didn't realize he's teaching for multiple days. So I end up in his class anyway. And he started teaching essentially the practices of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Have you ever read that book? Yeah, where he was sharing, how rich, poor, and middle class make different decisions. And again, I'm kind of tuning him out. But he finally asked a question that I cared about. He said, "Who in here has been on a mission trip?" And I was like, "Me. I have. I do God's work." And he said, "Who in here has had to raise money for a mission trip?" And I was like, "Also me." And he said, "If you buy a house, you can buy a house with no money down, and if your mortgage payment is $900 a month and you rent it out for $1,200 a month, that $300 is a thing called cash flow." And I was like, "Go on." And he said, "You do that 10 times, you can live in Africa and you don't have to ask anybody for money." And I was like, "This is amazing. Oh my gosh, I can't even believe like that's possible." And so at 18 years old, in 2007, I went and bought my first house. And so they were basically giving loans to anybody back then. And in the process of buying it, I heard that you could do this thing called flipping houses. And I was like, what the heck? You could buy a crappy house, put a lot of work into it. I'm a hard worker. When you sell it, you could make $10,000. And if you save those chunks of $10,000, you have enough money to put down on an apartment complex. And that apartment complex can make $10,000 a month, which is crazy. I was like, what? If I had that kind of money, I could save as many babies as I want to, and nobody could cut me off. I just remember thinking that. And I actually want to stop and appreciate my little 18-year-old brain. And I want your listeners to really take that into account and think, what do I have to do to be in a position where I can live my calling and nobody can cut me off? Obviously, you can always live your calling at a different level if you have more funds and people are coming around you to help support that calling. But if you find a way to be able to afford how to do your calling, no matter who supports you and who doesn't. I call it being uncancelable, which is really good. And so I love that little thought. And I decided that I'm going to become a real estate investor until I can go move to Africa and do this full time. And so my plan was to do it and be financially independent. I remember saying out loud, I'm going to own my first apartment complex before I turn 26. And so, because in my brain, anything over 26 was old. And so, anyway, I set out to do it. And I remember searching which colleges teach you how to flip houses. And do you know what is the best university in the United States for? Yeah, well, no one does because they don't teach this. And I thought that was so weird because as I started studying how to build wealth, the two top common denominators for doing it was stocks and real estate. And if that's the common denominator, then why would they not teach it in school? Because colleges know everything. So I thought. so so I decided I can't go to college because they don't teach. I've got to learn another way. And in that process, my family basically didn't talk to me for like 2 years. They rejected me and told me I'd be a loser ever because I didn't go to college. And I was like, why would I go if they don't teach what I need to learn? It's like, you want to go be a teacher, you go to college to be a teacher. You want to be an engineer. But they didn't teach what I want to learn. So why would I go? And they're like, you just do. And I was like, why? And so it was like the beginning of me questioning society having it all together because they don't. And I do encourage you, like, if there's something you need to learn and they don't teach it, like, find a way to learn it. And so I start calling the "We Buy Houses" signs because we have those in the United States. I don't know if you have those in Germany, where there's like, "We buy houses," like, "Sell us your house." And, and saying, "Can I learn? I want to work for you for free." And they're like, "Get out of the market." And I was like, why are you telling me that I should get out of the market? When I read all these books, they say you can be a millionaire in like 6 months or less. Well, I didn't realize because I don't watch TV that there was a global economic meltdown, specifically in real estate, that I didn't know was going on at the time. So anyway, everything I touched for about 3 years was abysmal failure. I tried to learn how to help people get out of debt. I tried to become a loan officer. Everything I touched was just fail, 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 fail. And I was at the Cheesecake Factory one day, and I had been studying everything I could get my hands on for real estate investing, 12 hours a day, every day. And then I'd work doubles, and I slept like 3 hours. And so I remember I worked a double just trying to make enough to make the mortgage payment on my house. And after the end of a 9-hour shift, I had made $7 in change. And like the last person gave me a nickel, which is so little money in the US. I remember throwing my hands down on my apron and saying, God, why am I here? I'm smarter than this, because my apron was full of these real estate investing books. Like, I had really started learning how to become a wealthy person. And I was trying to tell everybody I knew, like, how do you build wealth? It's so awesome. You can do all this cool stuff, but I was still a failure. And I heard loud and clear, because I want to bless you. And I'm like, really? You want to bless me? I really need to make my mortgage payment. I did not make enough money to pay my mortgage payment. And you only let me make $7. Why? Why? This doesn't look like a blessing to me. And it's something that everyone on this podcast needs to listen to, is the blessings don't always come in the form that you want them to. But if you if you can adopt a belief system that says it's always a blessing, whether or not I understand it today, it's always a blessing, and you stay true to that versus falling prey to being a victim, then you are going to live a way happier and more successful life. So I go up to the host, and I was very upset. And I said, can you please send me home? And he argues with me right at the time he's arguing with me. These two guys and a girl walk in. I said, can I please have that table? And he's like, it's not your turn. I'm like, give me the table. So he finally gave me the table, and this guy in the booth sitting farthest away from me had on his wedding ring finger the logo of a house, and it said the Millionaires Club. And I said, are you real estate investors? And he said, why, yes, we are. And I said, I'm going to be a real estate investor someday. And they're like, sure, sweetie. Okay. Now I'm a 20-year-old girl I said, you probably read Cosmo Girl magazine, which is like a makeup magazine in the US. And I said, actually, I'm reading Think and Grow Rich, the audiobook. And they're like, whoa, you're probably, no, I said, actually, I'm reading Success magazine. And they said, well, you're probably listening to Hanson on CD in your car. And I said, actually, I'm listening to Think and Grow Rich, the audiobook. And so they kept asking me these pretty sexist questions that I now can reflect on and see. And I said, but I passed the test because all the stuff that I was doing behind the scenes, which are not your Instagrammable moments. It's when you feel stupid, when everybody else in your life is out partying and having fun with their friends, but you are dedicated in the shadows of night, studying and trying to put your life ahead. I had been doing the work. And when this thing popped up, an opportunity, I passed the test. And that's really what kind of Oprah says is there is no such thing as luck. It's simply hard work meeting opportunity. That's really what happened in that moment. And so they said, well, we do put on conferences where we teach people real estate investing. If you want to come, we pretty much have no females that ever attend, and you could be our token female. So I was like, sure. So I ended up going to Las Vegas with these strangers, and thank God, like nobody ever hit on me or anything like that. And I attended this event. And again, I'm like broke as can possibly be. And I'm around all these millionaire real estate investors that are buying like $75,000 watches and blowing like $2,000 on a bottle of wine and just crazy stuff around me. And I remember thinking like, oh, I'm so desperate. I just really need this money. But I also had learned with everything being a failure in my life that no matter what position you're in life, find a way to give first. Find a way to serve the people you want to be in the room with. And so I asked one of the speakers, can I take you to lunch and pick your brain? And they ended up inviting like 12 people. But I was present enough to be in that room and ask them good questions. And I overheard the guy at the end of the table say, I've got all these deals piling up on my desk. If I only had an assistant, I could teach them how to work my projects while I go around and sell real estate investing. So it was, I have volunteered for that immediately. He ended up hiring me. Again, there's like, you have to come to the island to hear the long story because it's nothing but feeling like a failure. And in the end, it always ends up a miracle. And so there's a new quote that I'm living by. And I don't even know who says it, but I learned it from a guy named Billy Alsbrooks, who's a mentor in my life. And he says, beautiful is the day that the genius finds out they ain't crazy. Because you're probably, especially if you're trying to do something that's never been done, which is not the real estate part of my life. That's definitely been done. But the rest of my life is trying to do things that have never been done. You're going to feel and look like an idiot. But you have to be willing to stick with it. And so I moved to this place called Nashville, like 8 hours away from my family. And, I feel like the doors have finally opened for me to learn this skill so I can go save babies. And within 60 days, I get fired. Yeah. And I'm at a conference that my boss was speaking at. And I heard these two crazy guys stand up on stage talking about all these deals. And I'm like feeling all low because I just got fired. And he's like, nobody's buying anything in real estate. The world has come to an end. Like everything sucks. Like I can't afford you. And I was like less than $2,000 a month for 1,000,000 hours a week. And so these two guys on stage I just went up to them and I said, can I work for you for free? And to our young listeners out there, I really want to point out that that was the smartest thing I ever did. Don't be all entitled. Oh, I deserve this. You don't deserve jack squat. Okay. Like value yourself. That's important, but know that you don't freaking know anything. And until you really know how to create value in an organization, then be humble. And instead of just taking the highest paying thing, so you can go buy a new Gucci bag, find a way to get in line with the skills and people you want to learn from. I wanted to learn real estate. I didn't have money to pay to learn how to do real estate, but I knew I could work for free. So I ended up moving into my car and working for free for this group for 9 months. And it was so painful. Remember that? Oh my gosh. I wasn't in my car that much because we worked 18 to 21 hours a day to find a way to make money in that market because it was a crashing and burning market. Very, very tough. But at the end of that 9 months, I did my first house as a partner with them, and literally everything that could go wrong went wrong. I said, I only want $5,000. The house makes $47,000. I'll do all the work. I found it. I found all the money. And at the end, they only gave me $3,000. And I spent $2,000 of that money sending them and their wives on a cruise to say, thank you for being the first people to ever believe in me. And it was, my account was negative $887. So I brought my account up to zero, sent them on a cruise. Thank you. And I was off to the races. And, I eventually got out of my car and, I had learned things that you couldn't unteach me. And it was that humility that really got me to where I am, because in the next 3 years, I became the Forbes 6th fastest growing woman-owned company in the world. Maybe it was 4 years. At the time, Fortune number 3, fastest growing urban company in the United States, male or female. Was nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year like 5 different times. Like, I've won a ton of awards in the United States, fastest growing Tennessee company, best in business, all this cool stuff. And it wasn't even about the awards. I didn't even go pick them up half the time. I just wanted to learn how to save babies. And I needed to create the wealth to be able to fund as many missions as I wanted.
So again, I want to take a moment to highlight basically what Britnie said, because up until this point, it became so clear how important it is to push through every obstacle that stands in your way, like you see on Britney's journey, and basically to have that mindset that everything what happens to you is actually for you and helps you on this hero's journey to your purpose. You know what I mean? And many people they just give up, and it's basically like a battle. Like, this hero's journey is a battle between your soul and your ego, basically, because if you remain in that fear state, which is out of your ego, you will never be able to push through and experience those miracles of breakthrough, which you saw on what Britney told in her story. Because when you are able to basically give yourself or your life to a higher power, some people call it God, some people call it universe, magic can happen, because you are not thinking of like the ego-based mind, which only knows past and future. You are basically then connected to the infinite possibilities of the universe. So that's basically another thing Britney mastered in my eyes, to have that ability to give yourself to God, and then go full of trust and faith in that flow of life. You know what I mean?
And that was my drive. And so if you want to do good in business, if you want to do good in your relationships, if you want to do good in really having a purpose in your life, it is to take the time to do your why. And if you can stay dedicated to it, it's going to end up bigger and weirder than you ever imagined, because you would never believe how these pieces end up connecting. And so doing these big projects, and I like tore through leadership teams because they never backed me, because I didn't just buy houses to make money. I had a different lens because of all my mission trips. I kept going on those mission trips on how do you actually wipe out poverty? How do you end poverty at its root? Because some of these places I was going, the parents were the ones selling their kids on purpose. They weren't getting kidnapped. The moms and dads were purposefully selling their kids into sex trafficking and complete slavery because they were so desperate. And these regions were so economically depressed that that was the only way that they could either feed themselves or the rest of their kids. And what a horrible position to be in. I don't think it's right, no matter what, to do what they were doing. But I've also thankfully never had to make those kinds of decisions. And so when I went into my real estate career, it wasn't like, let me just flip a house and see how much money I can make. It was, how do I shift this region? How do I change this neighborhood? And so I really developed a brand around completely mindfully revitalizing, not gentrifying, but mindfully revitalizing places to bring and breathe back life into them so that the people who lived there had better opportunities. And the more I've studied with how gangs originate and how they take control over regions and children, and so many of the worst problems that we face all over the world is because of desperation. And most of the time when people have better opportunities, they will take them. And so that was my whole approach, is if I can shift this region, I can do this in Haiti. I can do this in Africa. I can do this in obviously there's great places in all these regions, but the rough areas. And that was my entire mode. And I didn't know that would ever financially really pay off for me. But I would buy up entire 50 acres of downtown Nashville land that nobody wanted. Well, that worked out for me. So it worked out really great. But again, I had a lot of hard times and I couldn't keep a leadership team because they're like, Britnie, this is not how you make money. And I was like, that is not my only thing that I want to do. I'm just not driven by money. It is important because your staff aren't free. They're not volunteers. You have to find a way to pay your bills, and you do have to find a way to keep your team. But it's never been my driver. I have had a perspective that has given me an edge my entire life. And that is why all of my organizations are called Ariel. It's to have that big picture mindset on what really matters in life. So Ariel in English means to have this big picture view. So I got really good at shifting regions, and I asked God, how do I go from what I'm doing here to Africa? Because that's where I always felt really called to. And I heard loud and clear, start on islands. And I was like, what the heck? The island have to do with saving babies? That's the weirdest thing ever. And I created a plan on how you would use an island to change the whole world. It took me forever to make this plan. But how do you get the pieces, the people really who have the keys to solving clean water, to education, to malnutrition, to really teaching people that your kids aren't just meant to be sold or raped. And again, finding the people who have solved these problems and put them all in a room. And that was my original vision. And then it's expanded to really waking people up, because again, I kept going on these mission trips. And if I can encourage you guys to do anything, it's find a way to go on one of these trips. I now host these trips for people that are in our network that want to go get a hands-on experience, learning and seeing how desperate the world is for people that have access to abundance, to wake up, stop beating yourself up, stop falling prey to your own victimness, and step into your calling. And so that is the complete design of the island, is to wake up what I call the forces for good, to stop drifting and to step into what God has for you, because you are here for a reason. And so I designed an island that would heal people from the inside out, because when you are dealing with sickness, or you are dealing with financial stress or relational brokenness, and not even taking the time to get the clarity on your own life and your own purpose. Like, how many people can you help when you're distracted by the battles on the inside? You can't fight the battles on the outside. And so I created this. Well, first of all, I found a place that's like amazingly, there's not even words to describe. Like, there's something really special about this property. Like, it is one of those sacred places on the planet. It has a healing power, and I'm not a woo-woo person at all, but there's something innate about the space itself. And yeah, oh man, you haven't even been there and you could feel it? That's crazy. That's amazing. I haven't actually had somebody say that yet, but when you step foot on there, you feel the energy of this place. And it's made for you to heal yourself, elevate yourself, and then step out and transform your own world so you can heal, elevate, and transform the rest of the world. And it starts with learning how to find center, find peace, tap back into the creation that's connected to creating the entire universe. And in the process, I mean, there's so much more that happened with it, like falling in love, and then that person became crazy abusive, and having to like rebuild my life after that. Uh, and him, canceling the insurance on the island, and telling the sellers we're not going to buy it. And then a hurricane hit. Like, so much stuff happened during this time. But I remember promising myself that you don't get to ruin love for me. You don't get to ruin love for me. I will believe in this again. And so flash forward a year, I meet Jeremy. And he was actually a rebound date for me, which is just funny because I literally went out with somebody I thought had zero potential. And I made up a fake last name, and it was kind of going to be a prank date. And the joke's on me. But he was a Green Beret, and I was like, oh, that's, cute. Whatever. I don't know much about it. I'm not really into military guys. And I've been warned, I had thought at the time. But while we were just starting to go on some dates, Hurricane Dorian annihilated the Bahamas. And he kept asking me on a date, and I kept saying no because I was busy. And he finally came up to my office to bring me food. And he looked at all my whiteboards, and he said, "It looks like you're planning a mission." And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to go down and help the families that just lost everything." He's like, "You can do that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, can I go with you?" Well, yeah, I guess, if you can get off work, because he's actively in the military. And so he came down with me, and we're with a group, and they were moving very slow. It wasn't my group. And he, on like day 2, just like boiled over and was like, ah, and he just went into action, and he started helping. And I was like, whoa, you're really good at this. And he's like, yeah. And I said, is that like a military thing that you guys should just be good at this? And he said, yeah, we've got a lot of training that I think helps. I said, do you think your friends would want to help? And he's like, yeah. And so I had started a nonprofit and with my work in the BVI a couple of years before. And then we started mapping out how you would use veterans to help in disasters and cross-train with their skills and all this stuff. And we started deploying these we call them heroes, these veterans and first responders, out into these disaster zones. And we saw 2 things. One, they were hella good at it. Very, very good. Super effective, very fast, and they could get places nobody else could go. And they were built-in security. So like they weren't scared of anything. And the second thing was they would be good for like a couple missions, and then a couple of them would start like having episodes, like PTSD episodes. And that stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. Now it's PTS, depending on who you're talking to. And so we realized like they really needed to have their own healing if they were going to be able to continue to serve, because their trauma would pop up instead of being able to continue to help others. Like, they couldn't get past their own trauma. And their trauma was everything from, war trauma, to sexual abuse as a child that they never dealt with, that led them to joining the military in the first place, to really struggling with connecting to people again. And that showed its face when you're going to sit down with somebody who just, like, we have a woman in Bahamas that lost all 5 of her kids, washed away in front of her. Like, how do you know what to say to somebody that just went through that? You need additional training. And so, very long story short, through somebody that I coached, we ended up creating this program called Heal the Heroes. And it really started with watching Jeremy go through the retirement process and went from believing he was a barrel-chested freedom fighter, unstoppable, heroic badass, to somebody who thought that he believed the labels of going through the retirement process, because they like do all these tests on you to see your disability rating and all this stuff. They're trying to help, but they tell you you're broken, you've got PTSD, you've got traumatic brain injury, you are going to be a menace to society if you don't take these pills. Here's all the problems you're going to have. And they really shift their identity to like thinking that what's now their future is like being a homeless, broken person. When obviously that's not true. It becomes true for people, but it doesn't have to be. And so this person that I've now fallen in love with went from being an amazing force for good to on these prescription pills like a robot. And it was so weird and heartbreaking for me to witness. But he fell in love with a rehabber, by God, okay? And I'm an entrepreneur and a rehabber, which means I can see past the broken and I can see what things can be. And so it's really been just amazing to see how God brought us together, because he has all the skills to fulfill the thing that God put on my heart at 12. He is the key to unlocking like my entire life destiny. And I happen to just really be in love with who he is as a person, because he's amazing and his heart is beautiful and he's just so fun and cool. But I'm pushy, okay? I'm a gifted and pushy person, and I'm like not going to settle for this broken, dead version of you that is on these pills. Like I am into understanding people do need medicine, and I'm for that, but he was not on the right doses and he was not on the right stuff. So he was very anti-healing, very anti-doing work on himself. I think that's a lot of programming from the military, branding that as weakness. And so our whole program is whatever is worked on him is what the program, we call him Hero One. He's the test subject for all the stuff. And it's a year-long program where people can nominate. Many times when you lose your purpose, you don't want to be here anymore. So a lot of our heroes are people who have struggled with suicide or have attempted suicide or are struggling with addiction. You know, you have to pick what your program deals with. We're not out there building houses and like buying arms for people for missing limbs. Our thing is we provide purpose through service. You know, that's our healing process is we will help you find your purpose again by giving you service opportunities in the world. And
I think,
yeah, go ahead.
I think that's such a great timing, because the world really, really needs it, because many people feel very lost these days, you know, and they search for deeper meaning. And such a great thing that you have something like that in place at such a beautiful location also.
Thank you.
And it really helps the world, I think. I think that many people have a lot of fears to give, because sometimes it's a loss of control when you give yourself to a higher power, you know, and then have that faith. You go out of your comfort zone. But that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because you showed that through the faith and the action, you really can achieve great. And do you have something like a go-to prayer or something like that you always do in situations you feel lost, maybe, that help you?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, great question. No, I mean, I think I'll encourage the listeners to know that I've wanted to quit every single day of my entire journey, including today. And my great temptation is to like run off to Hawaii and just live as a waitress playing volleyball every day on the beach with a sleeve of tattoos and just own a Jeep, and be responsible for nothing and no one. And I don't think that you have to earn your worthiness, but I do believe that your real joy is found in walking in that calling, and that calling might have a lot of weight to it. And, we're dealing with suicide. We're dealing with child trafficking. We're dealing with disease. We're dealing with uh, animals and people that are set to be murdered. Like, we're dealing with people who just lost everything at the deadliest is that. Like, it is heavy. And so I have to lean in God's strength. And I'm married to someone who really struggles with a lot of mental health stuff, and he's wonderful, but it is not for the faint of heart. And so my prayer is just one of surrender all the time, to just say, God, this is yours. You gotta show me how to lead it. You gotta sustain it. You gotta provide for it. You've gotta uphold it, because I brought that island to life in full faith right before COVID hit, And I still don't understand why that was allowed to happen. I don't know. But I can tell you, it is just because you're doing good doesn't mean it's gonna be easy. And it's hard when people you love and trust turn on you. And when you try to do good and the people you set out to help turn on you, that is something that we've been dealing with over the last year, is people trying to turn to destroy, and it does hurt your heart. But you have to remember why you're doing it and who you're doing it for. And it's not for the accolades. You're doing it for God. And so for me, really taking the time to spend time with God and to get to know God and to look at all the things that God has brought you through already is a faith builder in my own life. When you feel like you're just dangling in an abyss over a cliff, it's not been easy. But I don't think there's like a go-to prayer. I've been listening to Neville Goddard lately, who I really appreciate, understanding, like, my middle name is Faith. And so I feel like he explains the science of faith really well, which is feeling that way. Like, how do you embody the wish fulfilled versus just hoping and saying a prayer, but actually living in doubt and fear? And so just taking time to like envision it. All this crap like actually works, guys. Like visualizing, the gratitude, all that stuff. Like, I've called it crap in my lifetime. I'm like, ugh, but it does work. And listening to podcasts like this, they absolutely work. So
They do. And what came to my mind when you were talking was, like, whenever you take on that journey of business or purpose, you automatically take on like a hero's journey of the soul who always wants to grow and evolve, and you get tested by God. And like, from what you told earlier, those months where you were living in your car, you built that strength already that makes you able to deal with that stuff today because of what you experience already, right? So it's a constant journey of growth.
yeah, absolutely. That's the truth. Is I used to believe that if it was God, the Red Sea would just part and doors just open and it'd be easy. Oh, it's just God. It's just so easy. But either I attracted it or whatever. It's not been that case for me. And so I want to encourage the listeners that if you're hitting obstacles, many times God's giving you the opportunity to build the muscle to this at that next level, because you're gonna need it. There are different levels, different devils, and you're gonna have the strength to survive what is up there. And if you're asking to go to the next level, you're gonna need it. And so those obstacles are still for you. They're still for your expansion. They're still a blessing. Don't label them a problem or a curse, because in the future, you're probably going to say it was the best thing that ever happened to you.
Yeah, and your story, I think, really gives hope to people that are listening, because from what I see, many people go through like the dark night of the soul these days. really tough times. And um, I did as well, like many years, like my night of the soul phase was like 10 years with ups and downs, and um, when you push through those miracles, like when God told you you're about to be blessed,
Yeah.
that's what I always experienced after those hard times, where you build that strength, you don't give up, then the blessings really come fast in a magical
Mhm.
way from what you said, often what you don't even expect.
It's normally through a channel you won't expect. But that's the thing, you give, 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 and know that God will give it to you back in another way, probably not in the channel you imagined. But, we're all going to die someday. So you might as well go for these dreams. You might as well do the hard things, and you might as well know that doing things that matter it's not the easy road, but it's a life that you're proud of.
Yeah. So one more thing I'm really interested about. So you have a high motor and you have a busy day. Are there certain routines that really helps you to structure your day and maybe relax or something like that that you might want to share?
Uh, I do have a very high up tempo right now, because I am the CEO of the nonprofit and I do it for free, which means I still have to do other things for money. So I'm the owner of the island and we have incredible programming there. We do retreats. I help coach Forces for Good into stepping into their calling. And it is my gift to be able to help lead the nonprofit. My husband runs most of the day to day, and he's an incredible leader there. But I'm bringing my entrepreneur skills and the strategy, at least in the strategy piece of doing that. But we're doing stuff that has never been done before. We're creating the playbook on anti-trafficking and real solutions that help end it globally. So it's a lot. And it's a lot because we have a baby now, and that has changed my life in that I don't have all those evening hours to work till midnight like I used to. And so I have literally a Google spreadsheet that I created from studying billionaires and how they manage their days, because the billionaire and the beggar have the same 24 hours. And it's what you do in their free time or those micro minutes, and remembering even what you're supposed to do in those micro minutes that will give you the difference on which side of the spectrum you're going to end up on. So, this sheet, it's called a priority sheet, and it allows me to know what is my priority and how do I stay focused and present on the most important things all the time. And I actually read my eulogy every day. So that's really centering for me. The one practice I always give everyone whenever I am teaching, if I only have one thing I can teach, is to do the same thing that woke me up at 17 years old to being able to live an intentional life. Even though I had purpose, I was not living my day to day intentionally because I just thought I had forever. I'm a teenager at the time. Now, once I wrote my eulogy, I realized that I am human. The only thing guaranteed in life is that we're going to die. And that allowed me to spend my time like you would spend your money. You only have so much money, you only have so much time, really intentionally on building things that I wanted to grow. And so, reading that eulogy every day allows you to look at your time and ask yourself, does this align with the long-term vision of where I really want to go? And if I have meetings on my list that don't make sense with where I want to go, I cancel them. A lot of people will want your time, but I only want so much. And now I have a baby, so I have to be really picky on who gets my time. And so uh, that's one of the best things that I do, because every day is different. We're all over the world. We're doing missions. We're leading events. We're speaking. We're looking to power those forces for good around the world, because I think if we do that, we really can solve so many problems in our lifetime by mostly just waking up the people who have the ability to make these changes, wake them up to their power to make these changes. So if you listeners, I'll leave you with this. If you have ever thought, my life doesn't matter, I can't really do anything and changing the world is too hard, please know that there are probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who are suffering because you refuse to take the time to recognize who you really are and what you have the power to do. And it is your joy to get to do that work. It is not a burden. It is beautiful, and it's absolutely worth it.
Oh, that's great advice. Of course, I will put all the links towards the foundation, the island. Is it right that people can all also do like vacation on the island?
And we used to do buyout only where you'd have to rent the whole island, but now we let people actually come and rent a room there. You can bring your families, and much lower barrier to entry. We really want people to come experience it, and it is still going to change your life. If you come to a summit, obviously those are like hyper immersive experiences that create like radical transformation in a short period of time. But even if you're just looking to go heal your heart, elevate your soul, book a room, and I would love to meet you guys there. I can't wait to see you there, Julian, this year. It's going to be.
Yes, so thanks again, Britnie, for all the insights, the inspiration, and you are definitely the definition of a bold leader with a big heart. And if you want to learn more about Britnie's foundation, the island, if you want to take a vacation or a retreat, I will put all the links in the description in the show notes. And if you want to find out what we do besides bold leaders with big hearts, you can also find that in the show notes. And I'm looking forward for the next episode.